The rain hadn't stopped all morning in Manchester. Cold droplets slid down the kitchen window as Amelia stirred a mug of tea with trembling hands. Her head throbbed, and her cheeks burned with a fever that made her legs feel like jelly. Still, she pushed through, determined to help her boyfriend, Callum, pack for his work trip to Edinburgh. "Are you sure you'll be all right on your own?" he asked, adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. Amelia nodded, forcing a smile despite the ache in her joints. "I'll be fine. It's just a bit of a flu. You go and impress the board." Callum kissed her forehead quickly, too quickly, then turned back to the living room where his suitcase lay open, half-packed. His crisp shirts, designer watch, and cologne were laid out neatly. Amelia reached for the neatly folded clothes, her hands shaking, and tucked each item carefully into place. It was something she'd done many times before, but this time felt different. She noticed a new tie she hadn't seen before. Sleek. Burgundy silk. Expensive. He hadn't told her he bought it. There was also a bottle of aftershave that wasn't his usual. A different scent. Musky. Bolder. Amelia hesitated. Then she dismissed her suspicions as feverish overthinking. Still, a whisper of doubt clung to the corners of her mind. As she zipped the suitcase shut, she spotted a small envelope on the dresser. Curiosity stirred. She reached for it, but Callum's voice from the hallway startled her. "Leave that, love. Just some receipts for the trip." He grabbed it from her hands and shoved it into his coat pocket, his smile too forced to be comforting. Something in his eyes flickered. Nervousness? Guilt? He kissed her again, this time barely brushing her cheek. "Rest up, yeah? I'll be back in a few days." And just like that, he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, and the flat fell into silence, save for the ticking of the wall clock and the distant hum of traffic through the rain. Amelia curled up on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket. But her mind couldn't rest. Despite her fever, something about Callum's behavior kept scratching at her thoughts. The envelope, the new tie, the unfamiliar cologne. She stared at the door he had walked out of, her heart pounding for reasons she couldn't name. Something wasn't right. By the second day, Amelia's fever had begun to subside. The haze in her head lifted just enough to let unease settle in its place. Wrapped in her thick cardigan, she sat on the edge of the bed with her phone in hand, scrolling through messages. There were none from Callum. Not even a good morning. That alone was strange. He always texted her while away, even during busy trips. She glanced at the clock on the wall. Past 10. If his meeting had started at 9 as planned, surely he'd have messaged her beforehand? She tapped on his name and hit call. 1 ring. 2. 3. Voicemail. She tried again. Still no answer. Trying to shake off the worry gnawing at her chest, she stood up, intent on making tea. But her fingers trembled around the kettle as thoughts swirled. She couldn't ignore them anymore. Why was he being so distant? She poured the water and walked back into the living room, where his laptop sat closed on the coffee table. He'd forgotten it. Her heart skipped. That was odd. Callum never left it behind. Not during work trips. Biting her lip, she sat down and opened it. It wasn't password protected. Amelia hesitated. Her conscience prickled, warning her to respect his privacy. But the tight feeling in her chest, the subtle shift in his behavior, and that envelope she hadn't been allowed to see, everything screamed at her that something wasn't right. She clicked into his email. Most were work-related until one subject line caught her eye. "Can't wait to see you again." Friday night was perfect. The sender's name was unfamiliar. Hannah. No surname. Her hands froze. Click. The message was short. "Hope you're all set for this weekend. Still dreaming about that hotel suite. I've never felt so looked after. XX. Her stomach twisted. No mention of business. No work jargon. Just intimacy. She checked the sent messages. Nothing to Hannah. Not from this account, anyway. Maybe he used another email? Or maybe he deleted them. The kettle clicked off behind her, but Amelia didn't move. Her heart was thudding, ears ringing. Suddenly, everything made sense. The tie. The cologne. The envelope. This wasn't a work trip. Callum had lied. Her throat tightened. She blinked back the sting of tears. Not yet. She needed to be sure. Amelia shut the laptop and sat perfectly still on the sofa, clutching a cushion to her chest, eyes fixed on nothing. Her mind began to work through a plan. She needed clarity, not accusations. Not just yet. But one thing had become painfully clear. She had been helping him pack for someone else. The next morning arrived with gray skies and cold light slipping through the curtains. Amelia hadn't slept. Her mind had looped that email endlessly, imagining scenarios, voices, rooms she'd never seen but now existed in her mind like ghosts. She brewed coffee just to keep her hands busy. The flat was too quiet. Every tick of the clock made her skin crawl. Her phone buzzed. It was a voice note. From Lucy. Amelia pressed play, already bracing herself. Morning, love. Just checking in. How's the flu? Let me know if you need anything. Also, I didn't want to mention this the other day, but are you sure Callum's on a work trip? Someone saw him in Bath yesterday. With a woman. The message ended. Amelia stood frozen, the coffee trembling in her cup. Her hand moved to the back of the sofa for support. Bath. He had said he was in Manchester. Her eyes darted to the coat rack. His raincoat was gone. But not the black one, the navy one he always wore when they went out somewhere nice. She replayed the message, needing to hear it again, needing to catch some mistake, some different version of the truth. But Lucy's voice was steady, concerned, honest. Amelia sat down and opened her phone's gallery. The last photo of them together was 3 weeks ago. A dinner at home. He'd smiled, yes, but even now, looking at it, she saw it differently. Something in his eyes. Slightly distracted. Not fully there. A pit formed in her stomach. She remembered the travel folder he kept in their bedroom drawer. Callum always printed his bookings, flights, hotels, even restaurant reservations. It was one of his obsessive habits. She walked to the bedroom, pulled open the drawer, and found the folder. Inside, she flipped through until she found a printed confirmation. Hotel Holcomb. Bath. 2 nights. 1 suite. 2 guests. It was booked under his name. No mention of her. The date matched exactly with his supposed work trip. Amelia's breath caught. The truth was now concrete. Paper and ink had betrayed him. She sank onto the edge of the bed, holding the confirmation in one hand like it burned. Callum had gone away. But not for work. And not alone. A betrayal she had only suspected yesterday now lay bare in front of her. Yet as the silence returned to the room, a single thought began to push through the pain. What else was he hiding? This wasn't just an affair. It was deliberate. Planned. Hidden well until now. Her fever may have passed, but a different kind of fire had taken its place. Rain fell in a steady drizzle over London as Amelia sat alone at the cafe near her flat, a place she and Callum used to frequent. She stared into her untouched tea, mind spiraling with every possibility. The hotel receipt sat folded in her coat pocket, heavy as stone. She hadn't replied to Lucy yet. What could she say? That she'd found proof? That her husband was in Bath with someone else, while she'd been bedridden and helpless? No. Not yet. Back home, the flat smelled faintly of Callum's cologne. She moved through it like a stranger. Everything familiar now seemed laced with secrets. She started to notice things. Little things. A faint lipstick stain on a wine glass in the dishwasher. She never wore lipstick. One of her scarves missing. A particular blue one, silk, the one she'd last seen in the hallway, but it was gone. She walked into the bedroom and opened Callum's wardrobe. It was neat as always. Shirts lined up by color. But there, on the top shelf, was something she hadn't noticed before. A small gift bag. Pale cream with gold rope handles. She reached for it, heart thudding. Inside was a delicate bracelet. Silver, simple, but definitely not hers. A small tag dangled from the clasp, engraved with an initial. J. Not A for Amelia. J. Her hands began to tremble. She turned the tag over. A date was inscribed. 2 weeks ago. He had bought jewelry. Recently. For someone else. Someone whose name started with J. The bracelet sparkled mockingly under the bedroom light. She didn't cry. Not now. Instead, she walked into the bathroom, checked the cupboard beneath the sink, and found what she was looking for: his spare phone. The one he used for work trips. Callum claimed it was for international clients, though he rarely spoke of them. She charged it in silence. When it switched on, there were no messages, no call logs. But one app was still logged in: his email. She opened the sent folder. There it was. A hotel confirmation. Sent to Juliet Marston at iCloud.com. Amelia's throat tightened. Juliet.
J.
She typed the name into social media. Within seconds, her screen lit up with results. Juliet Marston. PR executive. Based in Bath. Blonde, elegant, all curated smiles and champagne selfies. Callum had liked a few of her photos. And then Amelia saw it. A photo of Juliet at the Hotel Holcomb. Taken the same night he was supposedly away at a conference. The caption read, "Best surprise ever." Amelia stared at the image. Juliet was holding a champagne glass. The same bracelet glinting on her wrist. Every bone in Amelia's body burned. Not just from betrayal, but from humiliation. From fury. From knowing that while she'd packed his bags and worried over his health, he'd been laughing in bed with Juliet. She put down the phone slowly. Now, it wasn't just about uncovering the truth. It was about what she would do with it. Amelia didn't sleep that night. She lay in the dark, the glow of the spare phone beside her like a beacon of betrayal. The rain had stopped sometime after midnight, leaving the city in a strange, heavy silence. She had enough proof now: hotel confirmations, the bracelet, Juliet's smug social media post. But what she needed wasn't just proof. She needed clarity. She needed to see it with her own eyes. At dawn, she dressed quietly, layering her coat over a simple jumper and jeans. She slipped the bracelet into her pocket, grabbed her umbrella, and stepped out into the damp morning. She took the train to Bath. The ride was a blur. Her mind raced through every conversation, every moment she'd questioned herself. Callum's late returns. His cool detachment. His perfectly rehearsed lies. By the time she arrived, the sky was a pale silver. She walked slowly through the Georgian streets, letting memory and fury guide her steps. Juliet's Instagram had tagged a cafe. It was nearby. Amelia stood outside the glass window. Inside, Juliet sat at a corner table, laughing with a friend. Blonde waves tucked behind her ears. That same silver bracelet catching the light. Amelia didn't go in. She didn't need to. Instead, she took out her phone and snapped a single photo. Juliet, the bracelet, the cafe name in the background. Back in London that evening, she waited. Callum came home at 7:30, loosened his tie, and kissed her cheek with the air of a man who'd just won a prize. "Dinner?" he asked casually, tossing his keys into the dish. "You feeling better?" She studied him, that perfect calm he wore like armor. "Much better," she said softly. They ate together. Chicken pie and roasted carrots. She smiled. Asked him about work. He lied, as smoothly as butter melting on toast. Later, while he showered, she retrieved the photo from her phone.
She sent it to him.
No caption. Just the image. When he emerged from the bathroom, towel around his waist, he saw his phone light up. He picked it up, glanced at the screen, and froze. His entire body stilled. He looked up. Amelia was standing in the doorway.
Calm. Steady.
"Who is she, Callum?" His face drained of color. He started. Amelia raised a hand. "Don't lie. Not again." For a moment, silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Then he exhaled, a shaky breath. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. She didn't reply, because the truth was it never is. Callum didn't try to deny it. Not fully. He sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands, while the silence between them grew heavier than any argument could have. "She was just someone I could talk to," he said eventually. "It started as that. Nothing more." Amelia leaned against the wardrobe, arms crossed, her voice even. "You wore her bracelet home, Callum. That doesn't scream just talking." He looked up, eyes bloodshot. It got complicated.
I didn't mean for it to.
A bitter laugh escaped her. Is that your excuse? You didn't mean to? Callum stood, hands out as if to calm her. We were drifting, Amelia. You were always tired, always busy. We weren't connected anymore. She stepped back. So, rather than talk to me, you gave yourself to someone else? He looked away. I made a mistake.
No, she snapped.
You made a series of choices. There was a long silence. I'm sorry, he said. I truly am. Amelia stared at him, searching for the man she married. The man who once held her hand during thunderstorms and whispered dreams into her ear. But all she saw now was someone who had hidden behind lies and convenience. That night, she moved into the guest bedroom. No shouting, no drama. Just quiet finality. In the days that followed, they continued living in the same house, but the air between them had changed. Meals were eaten in silence. Their routines rarely crossed. Callum seemed lost, unsure whether to beg or give her space. Amelia, meanwhile, reached out to a solicitor.
Quietly, cautiously.
She wasn't rushing into anything. Not yet. But she needed to know her options. She began going for long walks after work. Down by the Thames, where the lights shimmered on the water and the wind wrapped around her like a cold truth. She found herself thinking of who she was before Callum, before she shaped her world to fit his. One evening, she saw Juliet outside a hotel in Kensington. Callum wasn't with her. She was alone, talking on her phone, her laughter echoing off the pavement. And for a brief moment, Amelia felt nothing. No anger, no heartbreak, just a hollow quiet. She turned and walked away. Back home, she stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair, staring at the reflection of a woman who had bent for too long, too far. That night, for the first time in a long while, she slept soundly. The air had shifted again. Not in the way a storm announces itself, but in the stillness just before it. Callum moved through the house like a ghost, quieter than ever, careful not to stir any more of Amelia's already crumbling trust. One rainy afternoon, while Callum was out, Amelia found herself in his study. Not snooping. At least, that's what she told herself. But something had been gnawing at her, an itch in the back of her mind that wouldn't quiet. She sat at his desk and opened the drawer where he kept his documents. Inside, everything was as neat as expected. Callum had always liked order. But then, tucked beneath a stack of folders, she found a sealed envelope. Her name written in his handwriting across the front. Amelia. She held it for a long time, the weight of it foreign in her hands. She didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she set it aside and stared out the rain-speckled window, wondering when everything had gone so wrong, and if it had always been broken and she had only just begun to see it. That evening, Callum returned soaked through. He hung his coat and looked at her with a weariness she didn't recognize. I went to Mum's, he said quietly. She nodded but said nothing. I told her the truth. Amelia raised an eyebrow. The whole truth. He hesitated. Enough of it,
she cried.
Told me I was a fool. She's not wrong. He gave a bitter laugh and turned away. I know. There was a pause, longer than comfort allowed. I found a letter, Amelia said. Callum stilled. You read it?
No.
Should I? He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes pleading. It was everything I never said out loud. Things I wish I had. Regrets. Apologies. It was never meant to be found. She met his gaze, steady and unwavering. Then why write it? Because I thought if I put it down, maybe I could make sense of what I did. Of how I lost you. She left it on the table between them, unopened, untouched, and walked away. That night, she sat in the kitchen, sipping tea and listening to the rain tap against the windows. Her mind wasn't on Callum or Juliet or the years that had collapsed under them like a house of cards. It was on what came next. For the first time, she wasn't afraid. Amelia couldn't sleep. Not properly. Each time she closed her eyes, her mind pulled her back, to the letter, to Callum's face, to the quiet way the house now breathed. She needed space, not just in spirit, but in place. So early the next morning, she climbed into the attic. The hatch creaked open like an old confession. Dust swirled in the morning light as she stepped inside, her footsteps muffled against the wooden beams. This was the only room in the house untouched by recent events. Forgotten boxes and old furniture sat where they had been for years. She wasn't looking for anything in particular. Maybe a piece of herself.
Maybe a reason to stay.
Instead, she found a photograph. It was tucked inside an old notebook filled with wedding plans, her own handwriting looping with excitement and youth. The photo had been taken just after they'd bought the house. Callum was smiling, genuinely, and she looked happier than she remembered being. It wasn't the image that hurt. It was the caption she'd scribbled on the back. "We will grow old here." Amelia sat down, legs folded beneath her, and stared at the photo for a long while. That version of them had believed in forever. Believed in vows and good intentions. Had Callum ever really believed in it? Or had she simply carried both their hopes alone? She didn't cry. She had done all her crying. That afternoon, she placed the photo on the mantel downstairs. Not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder of who she had been, of how far she had come. Callum noticed it the moment he walked in. He said nothing, just stared at it like it was a mirror he didn't want to look into. "I'm going to visit Beth," Amelia said, gathering her coat. He turned. Are you leaving for good?" "Not yet," she replied. "But I need air that doesn't carry your name." Outside, the autumn wind caught her hair as she walked down the street. The world felt different, like it had shifted its weight. Beth greeted her with a warm hug and a strong cup of tea. They sat by the window, the sky gray above the rooftops. "I found a photo," Amelia said. Beth looked at her gently. "Of the two of you?" She nodded. "We looked so young. So sure." Beth smiled sadly. "We all did once." Amelia looked down at her tea, then out at the gray clouds rolling in. "I don't think I can forgive him. But I also don't think I want to hate him anymore." Beth reached over, placing her hand on Amelia's. "Then maybe that's the start of peace." The wind rattled the glass, and Amelia finally felt still. Days passed. Amelia found herself caught in the strange space between resolution and doubt. The house seemed colder without Callum's presence, yet she had begun to settle into the silence, like an old acquaintance she'd forgotten but could still recognize. It was in the quiet moments, when the world outside seemed to stop, that she thought most about the photograph. The idea of growing old there, together, haunted her. The words written on the back seemed so naive now, as if they belonged to a different person, a different time. She hadn't heard from Callum since the morning she left him standing at the mantel. His absence was growing louder, filling the spaces in the house that used to be shared. Amelia hadn't decided whether it was the silence she was afraid of, or the idea that Callum had already let go, and she hadn't caught up yet. It wasn't until she received a message that the stillness finally cracked. It was a short text, simple and blunt. "We need to talk." She stared at it for longer than necessary, wondering if the words held weight, or if they were just another empty plea. Her fingers hovered over her phone, debating whether to reply. She had stopped waiting for him to come home. She had stopped expecting the world to right itself. But something inside her stirred, perhaps curiosity, perhaps the remnants of the love that had once been so all-encompassing. She tapped out a response. "Where?" "The cafe. Tomorrow." Underscore 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 underscore. The next afternoon, Amelia found herself standing at the door of their favorite cafe, the one they'd gone to on their first date. It still smelled of coffee beans and sugar, the walls lined with old books and mismatched chairs. The kind of place that had always felt like home. She spotted Callum by the window. He hadn't changed much. His eyes were the same, the familiar way he fidgeted with his hands. Yet there was a distance about him now, something colder, more guarded. "Amelia," he said, standing as she approached. She nodded, pulling out the chair opposite him. "You said you wanted to talk." He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking about everything. About us." "Have you?" Her voice was steady, but inside, she was a storm. "Because I've been thinking, too." Callum looked at her for a long moment, his gaze searching her face. "I never meant for it to go this way. I thought if I stayed, I could fix it. But I didn't know how." Amelia crossed her arms. "You should have tried harder, Callum. We weren't perfect, but we were worth the effort." He flinched at her words, and she felt the sting of them more than she wanted to admit. But it was the truth. "I was scared," he admitted, his voice low. "Scared of losing you. Scared of losing myself." She blinked, surprised. "Losing yourself?" He nodded. "I became someone I didn't recognize anymore. And I pushed you away because it was easier than facing that." Amelia studied him, her heart heavy. "But I wasn't the problem, was I?" "You were." He nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I was. I've been selfish." There was a long pause, and for a moment, it felt as though the world had stopped. Amelia could hear her heart beating in her chest, and she wasn't sure what she was supposed to feel anymore. Anger, relief, betrayal? Or simply sadness? "I'm not sure what happens next," she said softly, breaking the silence. "I'm not sure we can go back." Callum's eyes darkened. "I know, but I'm willing to try." She shook her head slowly, a faint smile playing at her lips. "Trying isn't the same as changing, Callum." He seemed to shrink at her words. She couldn't blame him. "I know," he whispered. Amelia stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "I need more than just apologies. I need to find myself again, away from everything we built." He didn't stop her as she walked out of the cafe. The cold air hit her like a wave, and for the first time in weeks, she breathed a little easier. Amelia woke up to the sound of rain tapping against the window, a familiar rhythm that seemed to echo her thoughts. The house was quiet, and for the first time in months, the silence didn't feel suffocating. It was a strange kind of peace, one that settled deep inside her chest, like she had finally exhaled after holding her breath for far too long. The cafe meeting with Callum had stayed with her, lingering in her mind like an unfinished conversation. She hadn't given him an answer, not a clear one anyway. It wasn't that she didn't care, or that she was angry. She was simply tired. Tired of fighting for something that felt like it was always slipping through her fingers. She had spent days processing everything, their love, their mistakes, and the slow, inevitable drift that had brought them to this point. And as much as it hurt to admit it, she knew she couldn't go back to the way things were. Not with Callum, not with herself. Amelia stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. There was a weariness in her eyes that hadn't been there before, but there was something else, too, a quiet resolve. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She had to be whole again before she could even think about rebuilding anything. The phone on her bedside table buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Callum. She hesitated before answering, her fingers trembling as she swiped the screen. "Amelia," his voice came through the speaker, low and careful. "I've been thinking about what you said. I understand now that you need space. I get it." She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of his words. It was painful hearing him accept it, but it was also the truth. She hadn't known what she needed until now, and now she did. "I'm not asking you to wait for me," Callum continued. "I just want you to know that I'm working on myself. I don't expect anything from you, but I'm here if you ever need me." Amelia could hear the sincerity in his voice, but it didn't change the fact that she was done living in the shadow of someone else's uncertainty. "I appreciate that," she replied, her voice steady but soft. "But I need to do this on my own. I need to find my own way." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "I understand. I'm sorry for everything, Amelia." "I know you are," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Goodbye, Callum." The call ended, and Amelia stared at the screen, feeling a strange emptiness in her chest. It wasn't sadness, at least not the kind of sadness she had expected. It was more like the space left after something important had ended, something that had once been everything but was now just a memory. She placed the phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked streets below. The world outside felt alive, full of possibility. It was as if she could finally breathe again, free from the weight of the past. For the first time in a long time, Amelia smiled. It wasn't a smile of relief or victory, but one of quiet acceptance. She was ready to move forward. She was ready to live her own life, without looking back. And maybe, just maybe, she could finally be at peace.